Okay, hey guys, so we're starting off our next chapter. We're really getting into biochemistry now. So our first chapter will be starting with our biomolecules and learning more about those, our carbohydrates. So we're going to be changing up our notes style just a little bit and using more of a Word document instead of a PowerPoint, and try this out for a little while and see how it goes. So starting out with chapter 13, what is a carbohydrate? So in chemistry, really the definition of carbohydrate that we use is that it has the carbon and water molecules or atoms in equal proportion or in a specific proportion. So we have carbon and we have water. So these are molecules that have carbon atoms and water split apart into oxygen, the hydrogens in different places. But in all reality, it's just carbon and water. So these have the general formula of CnH2ON. So overall, there's one carbon atom for each water molecule in it, and the N just stands for a number, an integer. So you could also expand this out so that it shows that you have one carbon for every two hydrogens for every one oxygen. And for example, a monosaccharide, which we'll define what those are in a little bit, but a monosaccharide is just the smallest subunit of what a carbohydrate is. It's the smallest one you see in nature, really. And that is the most common monosaccharides are hexoses, which means that it has 6 of these units. And so we see C6H12O6. And then additionally, in our this is huge in the carbon cycle. So plants make sugars and then we use them. So we break them down. So I'm sure a lot of you guys in your biology classes have talked about photosynthesis, and where you take the plants will take carbon dioxide and water and turn them into sugars. Oh. And then the opposite process where we use the sugars mixed with oxygen that we breathe. That's why we have to breathe oxygen, is to break down the sugars into carbon dioxide and water. That is a process called respiration. So photosynthesis makes carbohydrates and respiration breaks down carbohydrates. Okay, and then we're also going to talk about, just in our little intro, about what types of carbohydrates there are. So I said the word monosaccharide already. So this is the smallest unit of a carbohydrate. So it is, it cannot be split or hydrolyzed. Those mean the same thing. Into a smaller carbohydrate. So if we're talking kind of like polymers, this is the same thing where you'll see, we'll talk about polysaccharides in a minute. So a monosaccharide is like a monomer. It's the smallest unit of a repeating unit that you can get. Examples of these are glucose. That's the one we see the most often, or hear about the most often. There's also galactose, fructose, and then they all, or the most common ones have this kind of formula here, the C6H12O6. We also have disaccharides. So now mono meaning one, di meaning two. So this means that there are two monosaccharides joined together, units joined together. So these can be split by hydrolysis into two different monosaccharide units. So an example of this, if you took sucrose, so just table sugar, it has the molecular formula of C12H22O11. You'll see when we talk more about disaccharides that how you lose an oxygen there. And then you add water to it with an enzyme, an acidic enzyme, so acid and an enzyme. You'll overall split into two different C6H12O6 molecules. So if I just write the molecular formula for those, it looks like you're just splitting into the exact same thing. But in reality, sucrose is made of two different kinds of monosaccharides. So you really split it into glucose and fructose. So these are isomers of each other. So they're constitutional isomers specifically. Okay, I kind of got down into my polysaccharides, but that's okay. So the last kind of carbohydrate we'll be talking about are polysaccharides. So poly, again, meaning many. So that means they're made from many different monosaccharide units. So it's kind of like a polymer, but now we're making polymers of sugars or polymers of carbohydrates. So these can be hydrolyzed to form many monosaccharide units. So examples of this are cellulose, starch, and glycogen. And we'll talk more specifically about those examples at the very end of this chapter. And so just for a little bit of a visual as to what I mean by this. So monosaccharide, this is not exactly what a monosaccharide looks like. Remember, we're not, in this particular picture, we don't have quite enough oxygens in here. We only have 2 oxygens, but 6 different carbons. So this is just for a more of a general picture. But in a monosaccharide, you have this one unit, and then you can't hydrolyze it. No hydrolysis. You can't break it up into any smaller carbohydrates. A disaccharide has 1, 2 carbohydrates, and you can break those apart with acid and an enzyme and water to form 2 monosaccharide molecules. So now you take a disaccharide, break it apart, and now they're monosaccharides. And then polysaccharides, they're just a big long chain of carbohydrates all put together, and that when you hydrolyze those will form many monosaccharide molecules. Okay, so this is where this video is ending, and we'll see you guys in the next one.